Hey, I'm T.A. Charlie, and welcome to The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble and search channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you got to set up an account, but it's fast, it's easy, it's free. I did it, you can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. After the show, it's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and BitChute. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page, that's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes, study notes, and handouts for the class. The phone is working. If you don't know how to call in, email us and we'll think about it. Finally, you can email a professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back. This show is currently mainly listener-sponsored. If you are interested in advertising your business on the show, please email us. With that said, we ask for your participation on a value-for-value basis. If you find our show of value to you, then you provide an equivalent portion of your labor and treasure through the donate link on the Road to Concord blog page, the show description on Rumble, and in the comments on the other streams. And thank you to all of you who have and will support this show.
Good morning. Welcome to the Road to Concord. Today is Tuesday, May 26, 2026. I am your host, Joe Bakanovic. Almost didn't get on today. Power went out at 8:35. Just came back on. Just got everything set back up. Hopefully, I got everything done correctly. Charlie is still away on vacation. Natasha had family things to attend to today, so I have been left totally unattended. And as JMW has said, that means it's usually going to be one of those days. He didn't know the half of it. The secret squirrel stopped by this morning and left me a dozen or so homemade oatmeal walnut cookies. Big ones, thick ones, unleavened donuts. Yum. They are good. I managed to only eat 3. Great self-control for me. Most people would eat 1. Gluttony is one of those 7 deadly sins I have yet to master. Shouldn't be bragging about that. Don't mean to. It's a bad thing, but it is what it is. All right. We are in Genesis today, starting in chapter 23. These 2 chapters we're covering today, 23 and 24, are a lot of people would blast right through them, but they're rich with cultural and background significance. So we're going to cover them, to the best of our ability, maybe not in as much depth or as much revelation as some might sometimes think we find, but let's go over this, see what we can do. I am reading from the NASB 1995 translation, chapter 23, verse 1. Now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. I think that's the same Hebron as of today. I tried to find maps for these locations today, and other than Hebron, I couldn't find a map for any of the locations mentioned in the readings today, so I don't have them for you. So in Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So he probably went into the tent. And then Abraham rose from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you that I may bury my dead out of my sight. This is the first place where I'm going to stop. And I went and I looked up Heth. Heth is, he's recognized as the second son of Canaan, who is from the son of Ham, one of Noah's 3 sons. Heth is primarily known as a progenitor of the Hittites, a prominent group mentioned frequently in biblical texts. So I'm in the Bible Hub right here because it tends to be one of the most reliable sources that I've found on the internet in general. So the Hittites, right? The Hittites were among an ancient people mentioned frequently in the Old Testament, known for their significant role in the history of Near East and their interactions with the Israelites. They are often depicted as one of the prominent groups inhabiting the land of Canaan before and during the time of the Israelite conquests. And they're going to be primarily in Israel, but also in modern day Turkey, due north of Israel, right up there in that, the central and northwest part of Turkey. This is a group of people that was originally thought to not actually exist in history. They were mentioned in the Bible. They were mentioned in by different name, I think, in Egypt. And archaeologists were like, well, that's just more biblical myth, because they couldn't find any signs of the Hittites anywhere in archaeology, if I'm remembered correctly, and I think I am. Then they found them in Turkey, exactly where Anatolia. It's where the scriptures tell us they're in Anatolia. Exactly where they were supposed to be found, they were found. So once again, scripture proves to be accurate in its description of things. So Abraham said, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Now the sons of Heth, meaning his descendants, answered Abraham, saying to him, hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. So they might be flattering him here a little bit. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying our dead. Now, in a modern day world, we might think they're being generous. Or if we tend to be on the jaded side, we might think, well, they're trying to get one over on Abraham. Okay, you're a great prince. All of us would be gladly to give you, our burial sites. Well, folks, these burial sites they're expensive in this day and age, because normally what they did is they carved them out of solid rock. So they would basically pick a sheer cliff wall or an area where there was an elevated piece of rock, and you'd dig into it and you'd create a cave, and you'd make shelves in there. And what you would do is you'd lay the body on the shelf, and it would decay in there until there was nothing left but the bones. And then they'd go in and they'd wash the bones and either wrap them up and put them farther back in the tomb, or they would put them in a sepulcher, a little bone box, what they call bone boxes, and then stack them up in the back of the cave. This is part of what it means to be gathered to your ancestors, because the family groups tended to always bury their family, their line, in the same cave. So a family group would, bury themselves generation after generation after generation within the same cave. These things are expensive. They're not easy. It takes time. So it'd be a little disingenuous to think that they're saying, okay, well, you're a good guy, you can have anything you want, no matter how expensive it is. Don't know if that's what's going on, because we also know that it is a common practice of the times and in that culture to offer this type of hospitality, even when you don't mean it. And it's also understood that the person being offered this gracious gift is supposed to say no, no, no. And it'll go back and forth at least 2 times, maybe 3 times before something's settled on. If they keep offering more than twice, that means they really want to do it. Well, Abraham, as we're about to see, is not going to go that way. So he said, and he spoke with them, saying, if it is your wish for me to bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and approach Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he might give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, which is at the end of his field, for the full price. Let him give it to me in your presence for a burial site. Now, what is meant by the full price? There are 2 full prices. There's the full price of like a 7-year Shemitah type thing, meaning, okay, this is the commercial price, but the land never actually goes to you. In a sense, it's a rent. Okay, you've bought the right to use it, but you're not going to get the deed. If you want to pay the full price to get the deed, that's going to be more expensive. So what we're going to be told here in a little bit, in some study Bibles, it'll say that they're taking advantage of Abraham's grief, and they want more money from him than the actual normal market value for the property. Well, that's not necessarily true. More than likely what's going on here is Abraham is buying the deed, which is going to be more expensive in the culture, in the way they did business. So it continues. He says, now, Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, so he's in and around his people. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, even of all who went in at the gate of the city, saying, no, my lord, hear me. I give you the field and I give you the cave that is in it. All right. So this means this is essentially in the courtroom of their day and age, the gate of the city. So everybody knows what's going on. This is going to be attested to. So this is public knowledge what's going on here. So once it gets down to this is the cave that Abraham is requesting, now Ephron offers it to him for free. That's the cultural norms of the time. So it says, in the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you, bury your dead. And Abraham bowed before the people of the land. So he's showing respect. He spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, if you will only please listen to me, I will give you the price of the field. Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there. So they're negotiating. Abraham has already said, okay, you've offered twice. I don't want it for free. I want to buy it. Then Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, my lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between me and you? Okay. So 10 shekels of silver is about a year's wage for the average laborer. So 400, that's but we don't know. I looked at my study Bible and it said that what's going on here is they're taking advantage of Abraham and his grief. And I've always believed that. But I went into my cultural study Bible and it pointed a few things out. We don't know how big this piece of land is. We don't know how much of the cave has been excavated. We don't know how many trees might be on this land or what its other things that are on it that might be of value. Does it have a plowed field or whatever that can be used to plant? So we don't know what it actually should have been worth. We also know that Abraham is asking for the title, the deed. So he wants to buy the land in perpetuity, not essentially just buying the rights to use it for however long. There were two ways of doing this. If he just bought the rights to use it in a time of crisis, or if they get upset with each other, the land can be demanded back. That's just the way they did business back then. But what's going on here is Abraham wants the deed. And so Ephron says, okay, I want 400 shekels of silver. And he says it in a way that's like, so good, like he's saying, well, this is what it's worth. This is what I want, but I'm still giving it to you, so bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, commercial standard. Now, I didn't know what that meant, so I looked that up in my cultural study Bible. Commercial standard is that's the coinage that was most often played around with. They would use unfair weights to measure it, or they would shave off the edges of the coins. This is the standard of coinage or exchange that wasn't always done on the up and up. But if you had the royal coinage, that nobody played with, because you were messing with the king then, and that could get you killed. I mean, messing with somebody's money in the commercial standard might get you killed, but that would be murder, even still. But if the king comes after you, that's a whole different story. So in verse 17, it says, so Ephron's field, which was in Machpelah, which faced Mamre, and we know this is a place we've seen quite often, Mamre, in this storyline up till now. The field and cave, which was in it, and all the trees which were in the field that were within all the confines of its border, were deeded over to Abraham for possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went in and at the gate of the city. All right, so in other words, everybody is aware that this was done. After this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded over to Abraham for a burial site by the sons of Heth. Now, why is this important? I went and looked into this. First of all, the cave of Machpelah, here it is. What I found interesting is, I should have known this. I didn't. Isaac is also going to be buried in this cave, as well as Abraham. And Rebecca is we're not told in the scriptures, but tradition says she's buried there. Leah, Jacob's wife, is going to be buried there. Jacob of Israel gave instructions to be laid to rest at Machpelah, so he's supposed to be buried there as well. This is a family cave or a family burial plot to which Abraham owns the deed. So what we're essentially seeing here in the scriptures is that this goes to the root of some of the things that are going on in our modern day and age. They'll say that, well, the Jews have no claim to this land. They bought a legal claim to a piece of the land of Canaanites. You know, what we think of as Philistines today, or Palestine. So they bought that right from the people who had previously been there. That gives them a family right now in that culture. It would have been recognized in that culture day and time. So nobody can now call Abraham a sojourner in the land. He has now got a legal familial, blood right claim to a piece of that land. He now belongs to that land in that area. So in their way of looking at things, in their culture of the time, Abraham's not just, a passerby anymore. He's not a Canaanite per se. He's not a Hittite or doesn't belong to any of the other peoples of the land, but he is now represents the head of a tribe that has now become part of the land of Canaan, in the Philistines or whatever. He's now recognized as one of the tribes in that area, a rather well-to-do tribe, because he's grown in strength and wealth and power and size, and he's been blessed. So this, even today in our way of thinking, to claim that the house of Judah and the house of Israel have no legitimacy in the Holy Land, that's a false claim. Abraham bought that right. Okay. And he was given the right to sojourn there earlier, but then he bought part of the land. He now owns a piece of it. He's become a piece, part and parcel of that area. And Yahweh's going to give him more of it through conquest and things go on, as we'll see. So we're going to go to chapter 24 now. It says, now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and Yahweh had blessed Abraham in every way. And pretty much probably means that way. Good family, money, good character and nature. He's well known and respected in and around the area where he's living and everything. Flocks multiply, etc., etc. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his house, who had charge of all that he owned. Now, this is probably, what was his name? Eleazar? Is that, something of Damascus or whatever. This is the member of the household that Abraham thought that he was going to have to leave all of his things to because he had no son. And then he ended up with Ishmael and then Isaac. So that's probably who we're talking about, although the scripture doesn't say. So the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned. So he's running things for him, kind of like Joseph is going to do for Pharaoh, later in the book of Genesis. He says, please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by Yahweh, the Elohim of heaven and the Elohim of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live, but you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. All right. There's a lot to be unpacked here. I looked up, what does it mean to put your hand under the thigh? It's a physical action taken in accordance with an oath. But some of what I've ran into suggests that this is another euphemism, like the Hebrews use feet for genitalia. This might be another way of saying, take hold of my genitalia and swear an oath. Now, to us, that would seem really weird, perverted kind of in a way. But to them, maybe not so much. I don't know what the thigh has to do with it. It may be that you literally put your hand under the person's thigh. It could be. Don't get me wrong. But it was suggested that this is an oath where your hand is in contact with a male person's genitalia, in that this would signify to them, to their way of thinking, that's extension and progeny. In other words, this oath extends past my death, because you're touching the source that I procreate young and further my line, my bloodlines. And it would also be, if this is the case, that would also connect it to inheritance. And that is part of what's going on here, because Abraham tells his servant, don't go to the Canaanites. At this point in time, he's the sole heir of all the promises Yahweh has made. And in their culture, you did not mix bloodlines when you were dealing with inheritance rights of this type of value. That just wasn't done. So Abraham is acting as royalty here with his thinking. He understands that he has an inheritance that's very valuable, more so than just the normal person. If all I have is a donkey in my tent, yeah, I might marry a Canaanite woman or whatever, because what's it matter? I'm just a serf of the land. Big deal. Nobody cares. Yahweh would care. He told his people not to do that. But in their way of thinking, they're rebellious. They might do that. But Abraham, he's Yahweh's servant. He's Yahweh's friend. And he knows that Yahweh has given him a great inheritance promises. So he wants to make sure that inheritance stays within the bloodlines. And I did read into this, and this is a cultural thing that my cultural study Bible tells me that this is very popular. This happens a lot in their cultures at that time, back in the ancient Near East, that they would intentionally seek to stay within the bloodlines so that inheritances stayed within the bloodlines. In Abraham's case, it's even more so important because he's dealing with prophetic inheritances, not just physical things. He's also dealing with prophecies in the line of Yahweh, Yahweh's covenants. So he tells his servant, go get a son for my, a wife rather for my son, basically from my relatives, from my family. So that's what this is about right here. The servant said to him, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? Then Abraham said to him, beware that you do not take my son back there. So this implies that there's some sort of danger involved. It might be physical, more than likely it's spiritual. Remember, the land where he came from is still polytheistic. They may not even know who Yahweh is. Verse 7, Yahweh, the Elohim of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife from for my son from there. So in other words, Abraham is just trusting that Yahweh's going to send his angel to pave the way and make sure everything happens the way Yahweh wants it to happen. This is Abraham's faith. It is now matured. He trusts Yahweh with everything. Verse 8, but if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this, my oath. Only do not take my son back there. So in other words, if you do what I ask, and the woman doesn't want to come back here, then you've done what I've asked. You fulfilled your obligation. You're free from my oath. Verse 9, so the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master. Now, that doesn't mean that that's all the animals he's traveling with. This could be the 10 camels that carry the dowry, the gifts. We don't know. And he set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. Now, I looked for that. I couldn't find it. But I did find out that what Mesopotamia means is between the rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And before that, it was named something else. Mesopotamia is a Greek word for it. That's what the Greeks call it. And it still means between the two rivers. There was a different Hebrew and Aramaic word for it. So 11, it says, he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. And he said, O Yahweh, the Elohim of my master Abraham, please grant me success today, and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, drink, and I will water your camels also, may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. And by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. All right. Now, this might seem to some of us like, the servant, Abraham's servant, is testing Yahweh. And he's not. And it might also seem like this is divination of a sort. No. You have to understand that even in the Hebrews, there was this practice of casting lots or putting a question to Yahweh in a yes or no form, and then either casting the lot, or in some cases in the pagan worlds, they would have a shaman read the intestines of an animal or whatever, or read the signs. But in the scriptures, they cast lots. And even the high priest uses, I think it's called the Ummim and the Thummim, to decide what Yahweh wants. We see this even with the apostles are still casting lots. That's how they appoint, is it Barabbas or Barnabas or whatever to replace Judas? I mean, they weren't told to do that. They did that on their own initiative, but they cast lots. Sometimes if you didn't have something to cast or whatever, like with Gideon in the fleece, you would do things not to test Yahweh, but to make sure you'd come up with something that's very unusual. And you'd put it in a yes or no type of thing. If this happens, it's a yes. If it doesn't happen, it's a no type of thing. So Gideon's like, let the dew be on everything but the fleece. And so it was. And let the dew be on only the fleece and nothing else. And so it was. So Gideon's like, well, that's really weird. So this must be Elohim, Yahweh, the Elohim of my ancestors. And it must be what he wants me to do. So the servant here, he's actually praying and he's appealing to Yahweh. And Yahweh, he says, Yahweh, okay, here's this really unusual thing. Because now if these camels haven't been watered for a while, they might drink as much as 10 gallons apiece. So she, 10 camels, 10 gallons, the size of a jar of her, she might have to make 100 trips to the well. It's not that she had to. That would have taken several hours. It might have been what she did. But the camels might have been recently watered. It might not have taken as much. That's not the point in this story to the original hearer. The point would be that she went above and beyond the call. He's always going to ask for here in a minute is a drink. And she's going to offer even far more than what he asked for, far more than what would have been required from common hospitality and courtesy in their day and age. So this is going to be an unusual sign. And the servant is going to take that as his sign. So he set this up. Now he's going to sit and wait and see who comes out from the village, from the town to get water. And he's going to make the test and see, which girl has been chosen by Yahweh. All right, we're a little early here, but because we're going to end early today, let's just go ahead and take the break now. Yeah, we're going to take the break now. I don't know which one of these. Well, here we go. Charlie's dance music. In 3 minutes, I'll be back, and we'll pick up on verse 15, where Rebecca is chosen, and we'll finish out with this chapter. We'll see you in 3. Okay, we're back. Before we go back to the readings, one other thing. This chapter is a story narrative, and it's very typical of the way people conveyed information at the time, especially, and it's constructed in a way to help. The little details in stories are important to that culture at that time. They all stand out. They all mean something. They're significant. It's not just, oh, well, let me just tell you the story like grandpa would have told it. The story's been concocted on purpose in a certain way to show you certain things. So like in this case, this is, this is why Abraham sent the servant to go get the bride for his son, and the importance with the inheritance is implied, and the faithfulness of the servant, and the uniqueness of the qualification for the young lady who's going to be chosen as the bride of Isaac, and everything. All the details in the story are significant, and the story's been constructed in a way to help them stick in our mind, in our memory. So we're back in the, I think, what's this, chapter 24, verse 15. And it says, before he had finished speaking, he's praying to Yahweh. He says, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. We covered this last week. I told you these lineages are important. The bloodlines are going to stay connected. Came out with her jar on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now, when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking. Well, now this is a voluntary act that is not required of her. And it is exactly what the servant had set up in his bequeath to Yahweh. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether Yahweh had made his journey successful or not. So she's the one that he's going to choose, or he's assuming Yahweh has chosen, but he's still not sure. This isn't, remember now, this man may or may not know Yahweh. So he knows that Abraham knows Yahweh, but that doesn't mean that he's a believer or that he's loyal. But this does show that he's concerned with fulfilling his master's wish and the oath he made to his master Abraham. So he's trying to be careful. 22, when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrists weighing 10 shekels in gold. Now this ring was probably in her nose, between your septum there. It's just something that snapped in place, and it showed an ownership, if it's what I'm thinking. And he said, whose daughter are you? Please tell me. Is there room for us to lodge in your father's house? Now, this is not a simple request. He's got 10 camels. He's not alone. He's got people with him. He might have more animals than that. If you're not fairly well-to-do, you're not going to have the room or the bedding you're not going to have the facilities or the capacity to house these people, nor are you necessarily going to want to. This is a bit of an imposition because you also have to feed the men that are with him. So he's making a big ask, which is not customary in their culture. Normally you wait to be asked to join. You don't ask if you can. So there's a little bit of a breach of etiquette going on here. And it's probably because Abraham's servant, is excited. And she said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. Again, she said to him, we have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in. So this tells us that her house is not poor. It doesn't mean they're rich, but it means they're not poor. Then the man bowed low and worshiped Yahweh. So now he knows he's found the place he's supposed to go. He's found the girl he's looking for. He said, blessed be Yahweh, the Elohim of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, Yahweh has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers. So the servant is giving Yahweh credit for guiding him straight to where he was supposed to go. It's a sign that Yahweh's hand is on them and on his mission and on his oath, and he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and it strengthens his faith, and he blesses Yahweh. And that happens a lot in the scriptures. We bless Yahweh. How often do we today bless Yahweh? Verse 28. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Notice it says mother and not father's household. The father doesn't seem to be in the picture here. I don't know the significance of that. It wasn't in any of my cultural study books, but it is important to note. It says, now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. I think it's the same Laban. I haven't looked up the bloodlines, but I think it's the same Laban that's going to give us Rachel and Leah. So we'll get to that. It's going to be the right age. So we'll get to that later because I'm pretty sure that's who this is. The bloodlines stay together. This is very similar, very parallel. This is a Yahweh thing going on here. And it says, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, this is what the man said to me, he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, come in, blessed of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels? Now, excuse me, just a second here. Apologize for that. All right. This does not necessarily mean that Laban worships Yahweh or even knows who he is. It just means that he's aware that this is the servant's Elohim. His God is Yahweh. And this is kind of funny. It says you've already prepared a place. Well, remember, this was already late in the day when he meets Rebekah. So this has been going on for a while. So might be nighttime by now. 32. So the man entered the house. So, he's got to travel a ways. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. But when food was set before him to eat, he, the servant, said, I will not eat until I have told my business. So he wants to finish his business. Now, this is a cultural practice of a servant, especially a messenger who's sent on a mission. They won't eat until they finish their mission or deliver their message. We'll see this elsewhere in scripture. This pattern or this cultural norm will show up later in your scriptures. It just shows you a faithfulness of the servant that's at hand. He takes his job seriously. And he said, speak on. So Laban said, okay, go ahead and tell us what's going on. So he said, the servant of Abraham, I am Abraham's servant. Yahweh has greatly blessed my master, so that he has become rich, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. So the son is going to inherit everything that the servant's master Abraham has. Verse 37, my master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live. So now he's told them, I serve a very wealthy man who has one son who's going to inherit everything this wealthy man has. I'm his servant. I come from the land of the Canaanites. It says, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son. So he's saying, I was sent here to Nahor, to his family. So now, Rebekah's family knows that this is where Abraham comes from. It says, I said to my master, suppose the woman does not follow me. And he said to me, the Yahweh before whom I have walked will send his angel with you to make your journey successful. And you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. So not just relatives, but somebody from his father's household, that specific bloodline. And then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives. And if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. So this is a repeating of the oath. And the servant is telling Rebekah's family this, specifically Laban, who is implied that he's now the male head of this household. Verse 42, so I came today to the spring and said, O Yahweh, the Elohim of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey on which I go successful, behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and she will say to me, you drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom Yahweh has appointed for my master's son. So essentially, he's not only proven that Rebecca's the one he's supposed to get, he's making the case to her family that he's not the one who chose Rebecca, but the God of Abraham chose Rebecca for him. So he's making a godly case to Rebecca's family. He continues, before I had finished speaking in his heart, which means he was praying, behold, Rebecca came out with her jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, please let me drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. Then I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelet on her wrists. So essentially, she's already kind of betrothed her at that moment. It's telling people she's taken. In their culture, there's a claim on her. And I bowed low and worshiped Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, the Elohim of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. There's that phrase, in the way. That happens a lot. In the right way, in the right path, in the right way to walk, in the right way to live, in the right way to do things. He guided my destiny. So now if you are going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, let me know that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. So two things going here. In other words, to the right or the left, go another way, do something else, keep looking, try to fulfill my mission somewhere else. He's asking, are you going to be true and faithful, upright? Are you going to deal, honestly here? And if not, tell me now, and it's also a case of, do you consent to this? If not, let me know. This is also a way of, be careful with this passage that you sometimes see on bumper stickers, a fool inclines to the left and a wise man to the right. That doesn't have anything to do with politics. Like some people, the little left is Democrat, they're fools, right? Don't. It's a Hebrew saying. It's just a way of speaking. So then Laban and Bethuel replied, the matter comes from Yahweh, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. In other words, they're saying, okay, this is your God's thing, so we can't talk to this. So they say, here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as Yahweh has spoken. All right. Now, this is where we in our modern day and age, we're going to, see, women are just property. No. It's not the way it goes. She has a right to say no most of the time in their culture. Not always. But a lot of times the woman had a right to say no. And in this case, her male relatives had a right to say no. But they're going to, okay, this is a thing of your master's God, dealing with God stuff. Hey, we're not going to get in the way. Here, take her. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before Yahweh. The servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. Okay, now this is the betrothal. What we got going on here is a inference to the betrothal rights, the dowries. And what I was able to learn about this is, now it doesn't say that they gave anything to Rebekah. Her family doesn't necessarily say they gave anything to her, but the garments and the gold and silver articles and everything that's being given to Rebekah, it becomes her inheritance. Now it's not hers to do with as she wishes. And normally her family, her father would give her a bunch of things too, not property, but movable material things, that garments and gold, silver, jewelry, things like this. It was meant to provide for her in the event that her husband dies and she becomes a widow, or he casts her off. He throws her away, puts her back on the shelf, as the Bible might say, divorces her. That's how she would provide for herself. And if she's not allowed to use it culturally, it's not legal for her to use this stuff unless she needs it to provide for her own support in the absence of her husband. If her husband provides well for her, then her dowry, whatever, becomes part of her inheritance, and she'll pass it on to her children. But this is also where he gives, the servant gives money to Rebekah's family. They're not buying Rebekah. She's not chattel. She's not a piece of property. That's not what this is. This is a symbol of the joining of the two families. You don't just marry your wife or your husband, you marry into the families. You're joining the families, and they're going to become one, not just through blood, but also through economic and political position and power or whatever. So when the groom gives money to the bride's household, it's more of a matter of, one, it replaces the cost of her labor for the next 3 or 4 years, because her normal price of a bride was 30, 40 shekels. So 3 to 4 years worth of labor. But it's also a symbol of your financial destiny is our financial destiny and ours is yours. It's a symbol of support. So when we read these customs by our modern Western feminist and inflicted world, we read them wrong. But we also miss that this is not about marrying who you have these Twitter pated for, your little heart palpitations for. Marriage was more of a considered thing in most cases. How does this marriage benefit the family as a whole? So it's not collectivism so much to say as it is familial support. It's a function of their family life and preservation into the future, and how to make things easier for the whole rather than just for those two people who are getting married. So there's more going on here than what we realize in this day and age. So then it says, then he and the men who were with him ate. So Abraham's servant finally eats and drank and spent the night. When they arose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. So he wants to go straight home. But her brother and her mother said, let the girl stay with us for a few days, say 10. Afterwards, she may go. Now, that's a normal practice. They're not. But now notice this is Laban. Well, he's going to force that on Jacob later in the future. But this is a normal practice to celebrate with their daughter before they send her on to her new home. And he said to them, do not delay me, since Yahweh has prospered my way. In other words, this is a God thing. So he's reminding them, hey, there's a God involved here. This is his will. Send me away that I might go to my master. And they said, we will call the girl and consult her wishes. So see, she has a say in this. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? So she's being asked by her family. And she said, I will go. So she makes the choice. Thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse. So there's some money here, and the nurse might have been part of the dowry. And it also tells you that she's probably still pretty young, in her teenage years, more than likely. So they sent her away with Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, this is a prophetic blessing. It's important. May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. Well, we've already seen that Abraham was promised that his descendants would possess the gates of their enemies, and that his descendants would be as numerous as the sand of the sea, sands by the sea and the stars in the sky. But the thousands of 10,000s, this is echoing of Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh's thousands, Ephraim's 10,000s. There's a ring there. This very prophetic parallels. This is a really heavy rhyme in prophecy going on here, because she's going to be the mother of Jacob, who's going to give that birthright to Ephraim and Manasseh. So, yeah, we're already seeing this starting to lay out in the prophetic timelines. Verse 61, then Rebekah arose with her maids, so she has more than one girl going with her, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come from going to Beer Lahai Roi. Well, I don't know where this is, for he was living in the Negev. Now that's the desert lands in the south, real southern part of Israel. Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, he is my master. Then she took her veil and covered herself. Okay, I've read about this too. Women who were married would wear a veil over their hair and their face, the lower part of their face. And it wasn't a see-through veil. that was one of the ways of saying, hey, I'm off limits. Prostitutes were not allowed to wear a veil of any sort. In their culture, of prostitutes' hair was uncovered, which has echoes of why Paul tells women to cover their hair in Corinth. This is I know it's hundreds of years apart and it's a couple hundred miles apart, but the whole Middle East had common cultural traits. But I also found that a lot of times when a woman was being sent to marry a king, the people bringing her to marry the king would veil her before presenting her to the king. So in this case, Rebecca is going to be, in a sense, presenting herself, but she covers herself. So in their culture, there's a connotation here of, okay, I'm already claimed, but I'm being veiled like though I'm being presented to somebody who is or will become royal lineage. It doesn't necessarily mean that we should read it that way, but this is something that the people who have researched the cultural traditions using ancient manuscripts suggest may be in play here. So the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. And then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Now there's also more going on here. So Rebekah's dead. Her tent is empty. Rebekah was the matriarch of the clan. Everybody knew it. She was the head mother. So by taking Rebekah into his mother's empty tent, he's telling the whole clan, I'm inheriting my father's, all of his possessions. I'm the head inheritor. There is no other heir. It's me. So all of this is going to come to me. And now my wife, Rebekah, is the matriarch of this clan. So in essence, by consummating their marriage in his mother's tent, he's setting her up to take Sarah's old place within the clan, within the family of Abraham's extended family. So it's kind of a outward symbol of how Isaac's going to see and treat his wife. So these stories here that we've gone through, these are they're meant to give us detail and rich cultural connections and connotations, but they're also setting the stage for what's going to come next. We're still dealing with the promises of Yahweh, and we're moving from the generation of Abraham into the generation of Isaac. We're still not there yet. Abraham's still alive. He's still going to have some more children. We'll cover that next week, and they're important. But we've already been told Isaac's going to be the primary inheritor of most everything Abraham has, especially the promises from Yahweh. So that's what's being set up. That's what we're looking at, and that's what we'll be covering next week, and when we do chapters 25 and 26. So I don't see anything on the board that I think we need to address. So if nobody has any questions, this is going to be a pretty easy show today. I don't have much of anything else to hit us with. So what I need to do here is just tell you, hey, if you like what we're doing, hit the like buttons, please. If you haven't already done so, follow the show. Hit the bell, subscribe to it so that you know if and when we do new shows. I try to schedule them the night before so that you'll have a little advance warning. I still have a few more that I have to do that'll be off schedule. And if you haven't hit the bell, you won't know when they get scheduled. I still need to do the second show in the calendar. I'll get to that before Charlie wrings my neck. He's still out of town, so if I hurry, I might be able to get that done before he comes back and tries to kill me. And there are a few other things I want to do. Otherwise, hey, and also if you like what we're doing, share the show. Remember, I'm not a prophet. I claim no special revelation. All I do is share my understanding of the scriptures at this time and space, or at this point in time. However, I do study it broader and in depth and in more directions than most people do. I'm not trying to tell you, hey, look, new revelations or something they've hidden from you or they've lied to you. I'm here with I ain't going to do any of that jazz. I stand on the backs of other brothers and sisters that have come before me. Most everything I share with you, somebody else has already been shown by the Holy Spirit. They've already found it in the scriptures. All I do is come along and test it to say, okay, does the scripture say that? Yep, I can see where you're getting that from. Does it fit into everything else that I understand from before this? If it doesn't, I usually don't teach it. Or if I do, I tell you that this is a possibility, but I don't think so. If it fits, then I put it in the puzzle. The piece fits, it works, goes with everything else. Cool. Did you finish the Genesis study? No. Mr. Quest is asked, we're only on Genesis 23 and 24. There are another 25 chapters to go. Man, these Sons of Thunder, I swear. Natasha, you should not have taken off today. Somebody's got to keep these two in check, especially when the third one shows up. Ooh. You can't keep the children in line. They get carried away. No, we're still doing the Genesis study. So that's where we're at. Okay. So that'll be a wrap for today. We love you. We thank you for being here. We hope we help with your understanding of your scriptures and your strengthen your faith along the way. Tomorrow we're going to be back in the book of Jeremiah. Well, Thursday we're going to be doing our study on Islam. We're going to study the Quran. Mr. Quest says his memory is just as bad as mine. Yes. Okay. I'll give you that one. And then Friday, we're going to be back in the Scepter and the Birthright. And I will not skip a chapter then. So until we see each other again, y'all stay safe. Take care. We love you.